So, welcome to the Untapped podcast by 47H Studios. And today we have a special guest. Today we are joined by Sir Bemi Idowu, founder and managing director of Talking Drum Communications, an incredible public relations and comms consultancy supporting some of the most innovative Africa-focused companies. So, Bemi, welcome to the Untapped podcast. I'd love to welcome you and tell us. Tell us about the name as well, actually. Because when I saw the full name, when he types it into the questionnaire, I saw it was a little bit longer than just Bemi. And I know from my wife, who's Yoruba and a Nigerian, that there's a meaning to some of the names. So I'd love to ask you, what is the meaning behind the full name of your name?
The full name. Oh wow, we're going straight at the deep end. We're going straight at the deep end. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. It's great to be here. So my full name is Bemi Idowu, but because I live in the UK,
Yeah,
and Bemi is quite a long name, so somehow, my name's ended up being kind of shortened to Bemi, which
yeah,
strangely enough, I have this funny story I always tell about my name. So, first of all, some people still ask me for a shortened version of Bemi, which I don't understand, which is like very, like I've shortened my name 14 letters to 4 letters. I used to want to kind of, what do you want to have no name? But anyway, but the funny side of it was, so my full name became Bemi. So I was commonly referred to as Bemi
mm,
by many of my British colleagues, friends, and stuff for a very long time. Especially when my work kind of centered around European, UK focused brands, and that was like the context of my work. So Bemi was what everyone called me because that was the easiest thing for people to pronounce. But as I
yeah,
kind of transitioned in my career and transitioned into working with African brands and particularly working with Nigerians,
mm,
it then transpired that Bemi, 'cause Bemi doesn't mean anything in even in the Yoruba language that the name is from, because that's not the name. It's just like an anglicized version of the name. So I end up in a situation where the English people don't know what to do with my Yoruba name, and Yoruba people don't know what to do with the anglicized version of my
yeah,
of my Yoruba name. I was kind of stuck in the middle. So what you typically find now, so my email signature on my LinkedIn on most documents, I go by my full name,
sure,
which I think that just, so I introduce myself as my full name, and then I say, depending on the context, you can call me Bemi, or you can do this or do that, or whatever that is, depending on the context of the situation. And that tends to work. So the full name, as a Yoruba name, it means God has lifted me up to a place of value,
amazing,
or to a place of worth or dignity or something along those lines. Like, so it's a very sort of, like most Yoruba names, there's some sort of meaning behind it. It's not just like
yeah,
a reference that I'm referred to by. It's like a statement of something that my parents and
yeah.
my forebears kind of
Mhm.
like said over me as I was born. Yeah, I love the name. I'm not gonna lie, I think it's a great name.
No, it's a great name. I love it. I love it. And I think one thing that it takes me back to is one thing I'm hearing more of as well more recently is the power of names and almost going back to the
Yeah,
African
yeah,
history of some of the names and the power of them and the stories behind them. And I guess that kind of talks that kind of lends
yeah,
us
yeah,
around storytelling and the power of storytelling and the power of names and how important they are.
yeah, yeah. Side story. I know we're gonna talk about something completely different, but I've been doing some research into like naming conventions in like different cultures across the world. So there's a very sort of um westernized kind of, there's a Western naming convention on how people are named and what the names stand for. But kind of
Yeah,
looking into other different cultures, like how do people name each other historically? So as a Yoruba person, for example, our naming conventions are very different from the English naming convention. So
yeah,
like pre-colonization, for example, like what a name looked like is very
mm,
different from what it looks like today. Kind of digging into that, kind of get an understanding of the structure, the conventions, and
mm,
what those things are. If for no other reason, just so that I can have that knowledge and I can pass on to my children, and these sort of the, because cultures evolve, right? So we're not going to just take everything hook, line, and sinker,
mm,
but we'll take the things that actually good and beneficial out of it. We'll make those informed decisions and pass it down to the generation, because I think there's a risk. Again, separate conversation. There's a risk of a lot of these things kind of
disappearing.
dying away. But let's not get into that now. Otherwise, we'll spend the whole conversation talking about talking
Cool.
about that. Um,
No
and
trouble.
I know what you want to talk about.
No trouble at all. No, I think it's a good one though. It's a good way to start. I think just I remember I had another story about my name actually, and I think I had a similar situation when I was
Okay.
working in Ghana. And funny enough, my parents called me. My British name is Scott, but my Ghanaian name is Kweku Ano
Hmm.
Ohene-Nyako. And even when I was working in
Okay.
Ghana,
Okay.
I had a similar situation where I was working in Ghana with some great professionals in the copywriting team, and one guy said, "Scott, why did your parents call you Scott? Isn't that a dog's name?" I was like, "What?" I was like,
Not very direct. I love that about it as well. Very direct. No malice. It's just very direct.
"That's very direct.
It's
That's
like
very
what politics. Yeah, like
it's, yeah, exactly, very direct." So I think from that time on, I was like, "Just call me Kweku Ano," and then that way, I think
oh. Well, to
more
be
like
difficult, like
sense.
because yeah, because that guy now, anytime he calls you Scott now, even if he's apologized a million times, you're thinking in the back of your head, like he said that to me about my name. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So sometimes I remember I had to make sure that I emphasize the full name of my surname, and also make sure that I don't
Mhm.
neglect, I guess, the African or my Ghanaian local name as well.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, it's very
yeah,
important, very important, very important. But yeah, yeah, like names. I'm in a I'm in a. Was one of the things I'm fascinated about at the moment.
mm,
Names and naming conventions, especially like in African context. Like it's
yeah,
when I have more time, I'll probably do more research into it. But
yeah, no,
then
definitely.
that's something for the future.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But I guess we should probably kick into or dive into the first question that I had for you, actually, which is kind of, I guess, like a
Yes, yes, yes.
small intro into storytelling as one of our key themes for the conversation.
Okay.
And I'd love to, I guess, as a fellow storyteller, I'd love to kick things off by asking, where does your story start in terms of, the origin story, or paint a picture, I guess, of maybe some of your fondest memories as a young Bemi.
So maybe so I've been asked this question once before, and I was like, there's an answer I give, but sometimes I kind of review the answer. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, so when I was younger, or when I was
Yeah.
I remember as a child, I was very fond of just being by myself. So I spent a lot of time just playing alone. Like I come from a large family, I have like loads of cousins, loads of friends, but I would just do my own thing in the corner, and I'll be in a world of my own, kind of like in a way just building my own imagination. So
Mm.
like just whatever games that everyone was playing in twos, I'll be kind of playing by myself, like playing Ludo by myself, all four different colors, or like that. I was that kid, right, growing up, and also we did table soccer was one game. Like there's certain vintage of Nigerians will be familiar with what table soccer is. Um,
Mhm.
but I played a lot of these games like by myself, and it was like so. I think what that period of my life really helped me to do was kind of activate my imagination,
Okay.
and I was able to kind of conceive of realities that were not necessarily like obvious to most other people. So what
Yeah.
that then meant as well, and at the same time, uh, somehow I'm still trying to understand the writing part of it, because for me, there's one thing to have a picture in your head, there's another thing to be able to put it down on paper. And one of the things I remember from school all the way through, because I have again, funny story about me in school. Like, I got the same feedback in school in Nigeria and school in the UK, that if only you worked hard, you'll be a better, you'll be a but again, that's another story for another time. But one of the things I always got complimented on side of the pond was my writing. I always got told that you write so well. Like, and it
Mm.
was just one of these things where it was like, it was very clear. My senses are really good flow, and people really, my teachers always commended me all the way from primary, secondary to university.
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of those two things. So the early experience of having a very active imagination, and then having this, I, I would love to call it like a God given sort of gift of being able
Yeah.
to articulate things in writing. So
Mhm.
a combination of those two things kind of led me to a position where when I then got opportunities to tell stories, I was able to tell them well, which then led me
Yeah.
down this long path, that's taken me to where I am today, where I do this for a living, helping innovative businesses tell their stories in a very effective and impactful way.
I love that. I love that. And I think that kind of I think that kind of reminds me of, I guess, the name of the podcast in terms of the whole idea about being untapped, the untapped gift, or I guess for your
Mm.
case, you've discovered that untapped gift. So, what do you think? I guess from your point of view, looking back, do you think that was the discovery or the aha moment? I guess as a founder or as an individual, looking back now, thinking actually that was probably one of my untapped gifts that has led to you who you are today.
Yeah, because I think because as a as a sort of younger person going through life,
Mm,
um, I think you have a lot of aha moments that you don't really realize or further down the line that you kind of look back
yeah.
at it and you're like, oh, that was the moment. Um, because I think I think I remember my first job in PR a while ago now, a few years ago. I remember like so it was so again I always say so I started off my so today we kind of do a lot of really cool stuff with like startups in
Mm,
African innovation and all this really cool like market creating innovation and stuff like that. But my very first tech PR job was with like companies that created micro components and semiconductors and those kind of tiny little things you see in your phone where your phone kind of breaks apart. It's that kind of thing where the stuff it's very sort of deep tech. Like I don't want to call it deep tech, but it's very kind of dense tech in terms of the level of information you're playing with there. And it was in that kind of experience, it was in that moment that I began to realize that like I had like an aptitude for this thing. Not to say I was the only one that did, other people did, but you know, sometimes you realize oh, actually I could do this thing and I do it very well. So
yeah.
almost like that's the moment like something kind of like kind of clicked in my head. And then
Yeah.
from that point it was then kind of going back and kind of unpicking different things and saying, okay, so in terms of aptitude thing, where does that come from? In terms of the writing thing, where does that come from? Kind of understanding that. So also for in a sense of I'm a big believer that if you understand how you got from A to B, then
Yeah.
that then helps you to go from B to C and onwards from there because you understand what you have, and if you're honest about understanding what you have, you can then look okay, what don't I have?
Yeah.
What do I need to add to my skill set to make me more effective at what I do.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that. And just
Yeah.
going back to that young child who was, I guess, he was told if he works harder, um, he'll be
Yeah.
amazing. I guess what I also hear is you had a natural gift for storytelling. So what were maybe some
Mm.
of those stories you were writing as a young child back then? Like what was going on in the mind of
I wasn't even
this?
writing. I wasn't even
Mm,
right. That's a funny thing. I'm one of the like so people like it's and I wonder if it was like a missed trick. I don't remember writing. I think I went through a phase. I think everyone in my school was writing like novels and stuff, and I think I did stuff
okay.
like that.
Yeah.
So I it wasn't like I was writing novels when I was 5 years old or
Mm,
anything like that. But what I was more likely to do, so again for context, I grew up in Nigeria. So
yeah.
um yeah, I know this was in like the like I grew up largely in the 90s and stuff. So
Yeah.
born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, and that time it was me playing like we didn't have like video games, we didn't have like Nintendos and or PlayStations, or even we didn't have like any of those kind of video games. So you have to kind of invent your own games in a way. So what then happened was as I was and I loved football. So as I was playing football, I was running commentary and kind of layering a narrative over my own sort of
Yeah.
football games that I was playing. Is that kind of so that was my sort of form of storytelling in a way. And again, bear in mind like what I mentioned before that. So for example, I'll give an example. So table soccer was like a very popular game when I was a kid. So probably
Yeah.
revealing a lot about my age and stuff, but it's what it is. So it's like literally you got like bottle tops of different colors. So you get like
Yeah.
a bottle tops, like blue bottle tops, red bottle tops, and then you kind of like set them up in formation and you play literally you kind of flick the bottle tops to they're then like a ball. You flick the bottle top to play the ball and then you kind of work out different formations to kind of score goals. And it was everyone was playing as a kid when I was growing up.
Yeah.
But the thing is, typically you have two people playing that. One person will maybe like the red bottle tops and one with the blue bottle tops. But I'll be playing that all by myself. So playing the red against the blue and running commentary
Yeah.
over. It sounds a bit weird and sad slash funny, but for me, looking back at it now, I think what that helped me to do is I was able to sort of activate my imagination in that
Yeah.
moment. My imagination was very active. And
Mm.
again, if you then layer on top of that, what then happened with my until I understand until I understand how it came about, I'll call it like a God-given writing ability.
Yeah.
Um, if you now layer those two things together, it meant that you have someone with a very active imagination that can kind of process a lot
Mhm.
of things and kind of bring mundane things to life.
Yeah.
Couple that with an ability to articulate those things in writing, and that lends itself very, very easily to like tech, where especially in like B2B tech, which is where I did a lot of my early years in PR, you're dealing with a
Yeah.
lot of very mundane, very dense information, very things that look very boring on the
So
surface, but you need to be able to understand it, bring it to life, and then articulate it in writing so that
mm,
other people can come along and kind of follow through on what's going on. So for me, up to this point, maybe I'll kind of unpick maybe I'll unpick my memory and come across something else. But
yeah.
in the sort of reflection I've done to date, I think that is the stream that makes the most sense in terms of okay, this actually makes sense as to why I'm like this. Maybe there's other things that I don't know, but for now, I think that's the that's the bit that I've pieced together.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I think you kind of inspired me to ask another question, one that I've been asking quite a few people in terms of from both sides of the table. So I guess for 7 Studios, we
Mm,
do the branding and the design and comms for, I guess, startups who predominantly work in the tech sector. But one thing that I'd love maybe for you to
mm.
share some advice on is if you were to speak to a tech founder, how would you use storytelling perhaps to humanize tech? Maybe from a founder perspective or even from a product perspective, how do you use storytelling or whatever, look at or whatever recommendations you have to humanize tech for some of these founders?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's an interesting question actually, because I think especially from a PR perspective, I think PR often gets lumped in this box of, hey, we have this new door handle. Go tell the world
Mm,
I have a new door handle. Like it's like, okay, like so. But it's almost like thinking of the strategic element of storytelling and thinking about how um, storytelling has been leveraged to sort of influence the way the world functions. A good example I like to use is the idea of Great Britain, right?
yeah,
Great Britain is firstly a brand, and then there's a narrative and a story around that brand that's been exported to the world that has been used in. I think that thing needs to be studied, and someone needs to sit down and actually do like a master class, because I think it's. I know this country has a lot of issues and people have a lot of justifiable issues with it, so it's not about that. But I think looking at it from just like a process perspective, how the brand Britain has been sort of exported to the world, and that narrative around what this country
mm,
is has been sort of pushed to the world, and people from all over the world are leaving their countries in their droves, either to come and visit here on holiday or to come and live here permanently. They've kind of leveraged effective storytelling to do that. Now, whether or not it's true, that's a very separate conversation. But looking
yeah,
at it from like almost like I like to be like, okay, for like let's actually look at what we're looking at
mm,
in real terms. And I think when you look at that, it's for me, it's like a great example of what effective storytelling can be like. So what
mm,
also is that kind of forward back kind of approach that I always advise, so like giving away free advice, but it's like I said, too often people look at storytelling or PR in particular as like, oh, we have this new door handle, go and tell the world our door handle, rather than looking at it from like what exactly are we trying to do and how can storytelling help us achieve that. So the
sure,
same way, um, any other business function with sales, with product development, with whatever it is, you have a goal you're working towards, and everything is feeding into that goal. So you need to ask
yeah,
yourself that question, and then tailor the story you tell towards the end you're trying to achieve, rather than just telling the story and hoping for an outcome. If you don't, for me, I'm a big believer, if you don't have a very clear definition of what success looks like, it makes it very difficult for you to actually
Mm.
know whether or not you succeeded or you haven't. So
Yeah.
for me, I'm like personally, like in life, in business, I have very clear goals on what success looks like. Some of them I keep very close to my chest, and only me and very few people know what these goals are.
Yeah.
Um, but like I have those very clear markers. So for me, it also then means when I hit those markers, I can know, right. And some of them are small things. Some of them are huge things that will probably take 10, 20 years to achieve. But I know that, so I'm not looking for those things to happen now. But again, it's this thing of storytelling, like looking, okay, how can I use storytelling to sort of fast track whatever success I want to see down the line.
Amazing. Amazing. So I guess just to help that founder who could be watching this perhaps and saying, "Oh, I need to maybe reconsider how we position our brand or product and maybe tell our story." Are there any kind of tips or maybe thoughts around the process that they could maybe take or consider when it comes to that idea around telling that story? Is there like a process that maybe you would take your clients on to kind of help them break it down, perhaps?
I think the first tip I'll be like, if you're thinking of telling your story, come talk to Talking Drum. Like we can help you tell your story better. Uh, I think
Definitely,
I think that'll
definitely.
be the first tip I'll give any.
Yeah,
But in terms of practical, so it's again, it's one of those things where I think it all depends on what story and what the nature of the business is. There's no, like I could sit here and say something that'll sound very profound, um, but at the end of the day, the utility or the value of whatever advice is given has to be in the context of what that business is trying to achieve or that person is trying to achieve. So again, one of the things that we sort of hammer home with our clients is that we um it's again, it goes back to the thing about success.
mm,
We have to have very clear definition of what success looks like right from the beginning, and then use your story to support that journey of success, rather than just like piecemeal stuff like, oh, we're going to publish a blog today, or tomorrow we're going to do this, or the day after
yeah,
we're going to do that. And when you then look at the sum, you're doing a lot of things, but you look at sum total of everything you're doing, it's not quite pointing in the same direction, which means like one is you're as you're giving here, you're taking out with one hand, and you're giving and taking out with the other hand, rather than like adding into the same pot, so you get like a big pot. So again, and yeah, so it's also looking at different ways you can tell different stories, and how best the right platforms, all this kind of thing. The different ways. It's a long, complicated
love,
conversation. But the one thing that I could say is universal across the board is, like I said, going to like the Great Britain example, the let's call them the conveners of that idea did so with a goal in mind that I think they'll largely agree has been a success, and that's what they were able to measure success by, and they defend that success by doing different things at different times. So I think businesses can also look at that and be like, okay, what's our ultimate goal? Where's our what what does success look like for us,
hmm
right? And then how can, from a storytelling perspective, how can we use storytelling to get us down that road? And you won't always get it right. You Some things will
yeah,
work, some things won't work. But when it works, it's almost like, right, this works, so let's build on it. And if it doesn't work, you kind of review it, go like, and then run it back. And like you would the same thing like with products. Like you launch a product, it works, you build on it. You launch a product, it doesn't work, you take it back into the lab, you chop it up again, you put it back together, and then you kind of run it out and kind of go from there.
no, I love that. No, thank you, thank you. I guess in terms of understanding what success looks like, and then bring it back to I guess some of the founders that we may be talking to or speaking about, and the whole tech sector in particular. What does I guess what does the term humanizing technology mean to you, perhaps from your perspective as a founder of Talking Drum? So I guess if you were to ask the question around humanizing technology? What does this mean to you, and how can we achieve this as tech becomes increasingly more popular? Because obviously we've all heard about AI coming in and taking over the world,
Hmm.
apparently.
Hmm.
So I guess from our side of the fence, from our side of the table, what does humanizing technology mean to you?
Yeah. For me, I think humanizing technology is about just bearing in mind that at the end of the day, every every person you speak to. So
Mm,
again, going back to this thing, when you innovate, whether you're innovating for a large multinational company with hundreds of thousands of employees across the world, or you are innovating for the quote unquote man or woman on the street, you are
mm,
innovating for human beings at the end of the day.
yeah,
So your stories must have that kind of human to human feel. So whether everyone gets bogged down in like, oh, this one is B2B, this one is B2C, this one is B2B2C, this one is B2G, like all this kind of different like
yeah,
acronyms and stuff that you kind of get getting thrown around. By the end
yeah,
of the day, the bottom line is it's one human being telling a story to another human being
yeah,
and kind of boil it down to that level. So, what does that human being at the other end? What do they look like? What are their needs? What are their wants? What 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 kind of what about what you're doing is valuable to them? And it's a value conversation as well. But again, it's
exactly.
looking at it from that human perspective. Once
Mm,
you're able to sort of, which is why people often go through the process of identifying personas and kind of going through that journey of understanding the person they're talking to. I think sometimes it can be very easy, especially now where excuse me, now where it's easy to just write a press release and just blast it out to like hundreds of people, or you can write on social media and blast it out to thousands of people and stuff like that, where you kind of forget that you are trying to communicate with individual human beings, like and those human beings, and also when you look at it from a business to business perspective, yes, you may be innovating for like a large company that has like tens of thousands of employees, but the person that will make the buying decision, that will decide whether or not to buy your technology for the company, is one human being. So like
yeah,
that's the person that you're talking to ultimately. That's the person that you actually need to convince. So again, boiling it down to that kind of level, like how can you connect with that person? How can you what matters to that person in terms of what you're doing, and being able to take them on that journey to bring them from, so it could either be a place of indifference to a place of love, or a place of love to a place of um like even deeper love, if you call it that. It's like that journey. The example I've seen used is you take them from indifferent to, for them to like it, and then ultimately what you want to end up is for them to become like evangelists of what you do. So they
mm,
then go around and tell that story. But you need to, again, like nameless, faceless companies don't evangelize about anything. It's human beings that do that. So
yeah,
you need to be able to connect people on that fundamental human level, and connect them to your brand, and then turn them into like your own like default ambassadors. Because once people start talking about how good your product is, then you know you're onto something. But that
exactly.
doesn't happen unless you connect with them on a human level.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, and I think that's something that needs to be spoken about more. I think, especially as people are, I guess the buzzword is AI at the moment, and everyone is talking about AI and how it's taking over the world. But I think there needs to be a reminder that humans are at the center of technology in terms of at the
We
end
always
of
will be.
exactly. So I think we can't be replaced because we are the ones either created the technology. So I'm hoping that that will hopefully help somebody in terms of a founder or somebody who needs to be thinking about their stories in terms of
Mm.
what story they're telling. And this regardless of how incredible their tech or product might be, they have to make sure that hopefully they're telling the right story that can be human and written and crafted in a way that speaks to the heart of the other human on the other
Mm.
side of the phone or the other technology that they're using.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I
On the
love
other screen, on the other side of whatever it is they're consuming the information from.
exactly. No, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. I think I had another question actually, just going back to that whole premise and I guess going back to Talking Drum as well. So one thing that I'd love to ask, I
Mm.
guess, is at the heart of Talking Drum, how would you describe Talking
Mm.
Drum as a PR company? How would you describe, and I guess what kind of sparked Talking Drum in the first place?
Mm. So I'll take the same question first, and I'll answer the other question. So that was part of talking to was ever the plan. So I had a very different. If you asked me like three and a half years ago, I had a
Yeah.
very different career plan. My plan was to kind of work my way up and become like global head of comms at it's like a big tech company,
Yeah.
like some kind of company that had like a
Mhm.
footprint in different parts of the world. That was the plan, and I like to think I was making good progress on my journey towards that.
Yeah.
But I'm quite fortunate that I'm blessed to have people around me that speak truth to me and kind of challenge me
That's good.
in
Okay.
terms of what I can do.
Yeah.
And it was in a conversation with one such person that someone told me, just literally looked me in the face and was like, "Ben, you need to go and do your own thing."
Yeah.
And it's someone that I value their opinions, and I value what they have to offer. And at that point, I kind of sat in it for a while. I spoke to my wife about it. We discussed the feasibility of it because starting your business is no small jerks. I prayed about it. I kind of just sat at it for a while, and then looked at whether or not it would work. Had a plan A, B, C, whatever, trying to figure out what
Yeah.
long term could look like if it worked. It didn't work because again, it's all guarantee of success, right? And it wasn't like I had anything promised or I had any kind of business lined up, as it were. It wasn't
Yeah.
like someone said, "Oh, if you come here, we'll go and do this," or "If you
Mhm.
do this, I'll do this for you." So it was like a leap of faith in a way. So I'm
Yeah.
thankful that we are where we are. Still growing, still a lot to learn. I look back at it and was like, and also all of this happened in the middle of the pandemic, by the way. So the pandemic was
Mm.
still on. I had like a
Yeah.
relatively steady job at the time. Not relative, was a steady job. I think I was in a good place at the company at the time, so I didn't have to leave. Um, but again, sometimes you have to bet on yourself,
Mhm.
and you have to back yourself to win. Even though I wasn't like I wasn't quite clear. Like I knew there was going to be a lot to learn. There'll be things I had to figure out down the road. I knew uh, a lot could go sideways. But at the same
Sure.
time, again, when I spoke to people around me, people that I speak to for advice, they all looked at me and were like, "Yeah, go for it. I think this is right for you." And yeah, I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I took the advice because it's the best career move I've made, and I'm so glad I made that move when I made it because I think again
Yeah.
the timing was great for me. So I'm very thankful for that.
Love that. There's two.
And then the other question about so yeah, I was gonna say let's go back to the question. So the other question about how do I describe talking from? So on our website, the strap line is taking stories of African innovation to the world,
Mhm.
right? So it's so what Talking Drum is in a way is almost like the engine for that. So we describe ourselves as a public relations and communications consultancy that supports businesses innovating in Africa to get more effective publicity for the work they're doing. So that description covers tech companies, it covers manufacturers, it covers businesses innovating in a bunch of different ways. We work with a few consultancies, a few sort of companies that look like we work with a wide range of companies, right?
Sure.
But the central thing to our storytelling is innovation. And I always say as well that for me, it's one of my long term targets is it's not even a long term target, it's a target. Whether it happens in the short term and the long term, only time will tell. But one of my targets is I want to live in a world where the predominant narrative about Africa is a narrative about innovation and market
Mm.
created innovation. So that when I open my mouth and I tell people that I'm from Nigeria, wherever I talk from, wherever part of the world, the conversation they want to have with me is about the market creating innovation that already exists in Africa and how innovation has kind of transformed the continent. Again, I use other countries. So you look at America or the UK, like people still talk about the Industrial Revolution in the UK till today. So how
Yeah.
can we leverage storytelling to kind of catalyze a similar narrative about Africa that will transform and the benefits of that kind of industrial revolution narrative still benefit this country till today. So how can we do something similar in Africa. And what we're really trying to do at Talking Drum is to use storytelling to catalyze that process. Right?
Yeah.
We want to spark it into life. So that we attract. What will then happen is more people will be doing business in Africa. We'll have more jobs in the country, more on the continent rather. We'll have more opportunities. There'll be more development. There'll be all sorts of good things. And I believe very strongly that innovation can play a strong part in that. And also on the side of that innovation is a storytelling that accompanies it, because you then have to going back to what I said before, you have an end goal you're trying to achieve, right? So the innovation kind of runs along the storytelling runs alongside that story. So if you try to use innovation to power something, then the storytelling is to run alongside that innovation, and we
Yeah.
want to be that engine, supporting like how it happens across the continent.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I guess what, yeah, people might call it like what the purpose statement, or the slogan that you really beautifully articulated in terms of almost rebranding the narrative that's associated with the continent, and tainting it so people, because when people say Ghana, Nigeria, whatever country it might be, then think of innovation first, rather than
Mm,
sort of things that are, I guess, less favorable in terms of how the world has perceived the continent in the
yeah.
past. That Yeah, that's really
hmm
powerful.
hmm
Yeah,
Yeah, we don't talk about potential. We don't talk about all this other stuff. It's
exactly.
cool. For other people want to talk about that. That's fine. That's their prerogative. But over here, Talking Drum, we talk about opportunities on the continent that are there and available now. We talk about
Exactly.
innovation. We talk about like almost like is it that kind of take stories of African innovation to the world, take stories of African opportunities to the world. Like is that kind of
Yeah,
that's what we're about over here.
yeah. No, I love that, and I think for so long there's been so many. I remember that there's so many, for example, magazine covers where it had things like Africa Rising, all that kind of stuff. It's like the sun has already been and risen. So yeah, so I love
Exactly.
that.
It's risen already. So we're not rising. We have risen. And again, it comes back to the thing. Just to touch on it as well. I think there's also this kind of perception, very unhelpful perception that
Yeah.
you're talking about risk, talk about almost like something for the future or something
Mm,
like. I know what I've seen in the last few years I've worked in an African context, and I know the opportunities that I know are available
yeah.
across the continent. The opportunities are there now, and in a way, I think half of the work we're doing as well is also like working. So it's not like we're not trying to. Yes, we're taking African stories to the world, which is good, but we're also taking African stories to Africans as well. So kind of opening up as Africa opens up with there's like a new continental free trade agreement that's meant to kind of catalyze like um, intra-Africa trade, which is going to be fantastic for the continent. That's going to spike the continent's economy. Um, the idea is that we also expose ourselves to innovation from different parts of the continent. So yeah,
Yeah.
everyone knows about M-Pesa in Kenya now, but what other innovations exist in other parts of the continent?
Hmm.
um, that we can sort of expose ourselves to, that we can adopt. So there are different things that happen. The agency banking model, for example, in Nigeria, that's helped the penetration of financial services across the board. B2B commerce models, where the same way you order off Amazon and stuff gets delivered to your house, like neighborhood retailers can order, they can order like inventory for their stores and get it delivered to the stores in the same way, so they can serve their neighborhoods. Like pharmacies can do the same thing, order inventory digitally. There's stuff around uh, integrating Africa's capital markets as well. There's stuff around that where, again, the capital markets one is one where I feel like it's such a slept on opportunity. Like Nigeria's stock exchange, for example, over the last 3 years has been one of the top performing exchanges in the world,
Mm,
with investors seeing ridiculous returns consistently over the last 3 years. But when you think about, obviously there's some structural problems around it, but a lot of these structural problems are now being addressed. But when you think about stock markets and performance, you don't really think of Nigeria. When you think of Nigeria, you don't think about like a stock market that's doing very well.
yeah,
Again, so
no,
it's
of
taking
course.
these stories out there and making sure that as much as possible we are again, to use the word, we're evangelizing this thing, and we are kind of taking that story out there. You can see that again, it's not, oh, if you do XYZ, we might get here in 10 years. It's like, no, come right now. The opportunities are there right now. Let's do this now, because we can do big business in Africa today, right now. So let's go.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. That's really powerful. I think that is probably one of the things that I was speaking to a friend of mine last year, and he said that he's on a challenge at the moment where he's responds to things that have been asked of him. He has to say yes, basically. So he never say no. So, for example, I think he ran a marathon,
Mm.
it's a marathon last year. I think that was one of the things that he was asked to be part of. And I think going
Oh,
back
wow.
to the idea of
Braver than I am.
yeah, exactly, yeah. But I guess the reason why I thought of that is because the whole idea of being intentional and the whole idea of doing things
Mm.
now, especially when it comes to the African narrative and doing business in Africa,
Mm.
immersed in Africa, investing in Africa as well, and the people as well. And one thing that
Mm.
one thing that we've been speaking about and doing is developing programs on the continent that almost utilizes and leverages the entrepreneurial and craftsmanship that is so prevalent back home as well
Yeah.
across
Yeah.
the continent and
Mm-hmm.
leveraging that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear all of that. And I'm definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I
Yeah,
love that.
we can spend the real 2 hours talking about that as well. It's like
Yeah, I know.
as you can tell, it's something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah,
I believe very strongly in it.
yeah. And the one question I did have actually going back to the first part of the answer or the response was, I guess one was you mentioned faith and speaking to your wife before you
Mm.
made the hurdle, the leap of faith, and then also speaking to
Mm.
one of your trusted members of your circle, I guess, who said, "Hey, Bemi, is that I guess your time is now." He was saying to you, or she was saying to you, like your time was now. So, I guess maybe for the entrepreneur who may be listening, perhaps what I guess one is how do you identify those core people, and then when do you believe faith kind of kicks in terms of okay, we need to pray about this, and I guess even and I guess another point might be do you have a plan B when and plan B, C, and D when you're stepping out in faith, or do you still have a plan B, C, and D even though you step out in faith? Yeah, those are my three
Again,
quick.
answer the first question. I'll tell you what I did.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll tell you what I did. I had a plan B, C, D, because again, I'm a husband. I'm a father.
yeah,
So if this was like 10 years ago or maybe longer, where I was only responsible for myself, I can afford to have a plan A and just a plan A. And if plan A kind of fails, like, oh well, like we kind of go back to it. But I'm
yeah,
responsible for people, right? I'm responsible for for my family. So it will be. I think it would have been irresponsible of me to just. I think this is my position. If other people want to do it differently, that's their prerogative and stuff like that. But for me, I was like, I had like a backup plan, and I have like thankfully I haven't had to use the backup plan, but I have the backup plan is almost like in case of emergency, break this glass
yeah,
kind of kind of thing. The glass hasn't been broken yet, and I hope that I hope I don't have to break it. Um,
yeah.
the other question about the core people, I think
Mm,
the way I think it's a combination of things. First of all, the important thing is like you always look at these people and you look at them from a perspective of you like over time consistently when they've given you advice, how has that worked out? And
mm,
are those people trustworthy? So, and trust is built over time, right?
yeah,
Trust is built over time. Excuse me. And when you build that trust over time, it gets to a point where okay, you know this person has your best interest at heart. You know they are equipped and qualified to give you good advice, and not every time, because again the other thing to factor in is there will be people who they mean very well, they're good people, they try to help you, they give you advice, but that advice doesn't work out. Doesn't mean next time they give you advice you shouldn't take it.
hmm
But it's like for me looking at consistent pattern of behavior over time, have these people shown themselves to be on side with me in good times, bad times? Do I feel like they're committed to my well-being and my growth and development and all this kind of good stuff? Once you can establish that, then it makes it easier for you to engage the advice that they give you. And again, it's not. I try not to make it. I've tried not to make it sort of transactional. That, oh, hey, I want you to be in my circle so you can give me advice, like that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Like those kind of things kind of happen. I think there's like an organic nature
Yeah.
to that kind of thing where you find yourself there. And also I believe sometimes, again, I'm a Christian, so like I kind of believe in prayer and kind of asking for things. Like so when I started talking drum, um, I didn't know I didn't know I had no relationship. Like I knew people, but I didn't have a relationship with any sort of agency founders like that. People that have gone down this road that
Yeah.
I could call on. And I remember saying, like, I prayed about that, and I was like, look, and then in the space of like a month of praying that prayer, I came up. So one of the guys he runs one of the largest PR agencies in all of Nigeria. I just got introduced to him like
Mm.
randomly, and he's
Amazing.
been like a great mentor, great advice, a great resource that I reach out to, and when I'm stuck, I'm like, ah. And there's like another lady as well that runs like a large PR agency in the UK with over 60 people on a team. Like
Yeah.
in terms of what they do, they're one of the biggest PR agencies in that space. She's also someone that I refer to for. But again, that relationship started like at that point. So I'm a big believer in seeking things out and putting things out there and saying also like just asking, reaching out to people and asking and say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I want. The worst I can say is no, right? And I think in a way as well, I think what kind of helps is from a PR perspective. I spend most of my time pitching ideas to people that they say no to. So the idea of
Mm.
someone else saying another no, it's like I think I'm just numb to it now. It's like, okay, if they say
Yeah.
yes, great. If they say no, I'll kind of move on and find someone eventually says yes. And if no one says yes, I'll just know that it's not meant to happen. So there's that element to it as well. So I think yeah, there's that side. So I think what that's helped me, it's helped me learn, and it's helped me learn a few things. Obviously, you start to learn things firsthand by yourself. Like no matter how much
Yeah.
advice you get, you make your own mistakes, you have your own experiences that will kind of teach you different things, but you don't have to learn everything by first-hand experience. You can talk to people that have been down that road and they can just tell you, they tell you, do A, do B, do C, don't do E, F, G, on and on like that, and then kind of work with that.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I think, yeah, I think everything you're saying there, I was just thinking, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, in terms of things that I definitely want to be more of as well, in terms of, I guess, seeking, being somebody who is seeking more, and also somebody who's prayerful, especially
Mm,
when you're making all these big choices and,
mm,
yeah, it's in life. So, yeah,
mm.
definitely. No, I love that. That's really powerful. No, thank you for sharing that. That was good. That was really good. It was really good. And I guess as we're looking to wrap up now, I have a couple of questions for you. So two questions to wrap
Go on.
up. So one is tell us one thing you want every founder of tomorrow to do and believe.
Uh, I think there's a statement that I live by,
Hmm.
um, and it's a statement is like impossible is not a fact. Impossible is not a fact. It's an opinion. And I
Mm,
think people have dreams, and quite often they're told that, oh, this is impossible, or people have tried it before and they failed.
yeah,
Like nothing is impossible,
yeah,
right? It may not be the right time to do it. You may there may be other complications that mean it doesn't happen. But I'm a big believer that nothing is impossible. So it's just about finding the right things, the right components, the right attitude, the right time, the right everything that you need to make that happen. And then things
mm,
can like if you a lot of the things that we do now, what we're doing right now, I'm all the way in my space, you're all the way in your space, and we are talking to each other, looking at each other, but we know the same. Like if you told someone 100 or 200 years ago doing this, they would say this is some kind of witchcraft, right?
mm,
That's not possible unless by witchcraft. Um, but it's clearly not. It's clearly not witchcraft, right? But someone figured out how to do this, and now we're here doing this now. So I think so. Bearing that in mind, and also not to be scared of failure. I
yeah,
think one of the books I read, two books before I started talking drum that really kind of helped me, especially in the early days. One was a book about it's called the Prosperity Paradox by Hayden Christensen, and it's basically about how innovation lifts countries out of poverty. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. And the second book I read was Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed, and that was basically working on the premise of how black boxes work on aeroplanes.
Yeah.
So when a plane crashes, they go through the black box and it kind of seeks to understand what caused the crash so that they can prevent it in a future like flight. And it's almost like being able so that plane crash, quote unquote, was a failure. But in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things, if the right lessons are learned from it and applied going forward, then then it's not that wasn't a failure. That was like almost like a step to success. So it's almost
Mm.
like there was a very good example that was used in terms of there's like a plane crash where they were trying to work out like everything on the plane was fine, and they were trying to figure out what caused the crash. It turned out the reason why the plane crashed was because the pilot and the co-pilot, or whatever the two people flying the plane, they're speaking two different languages, or they didn't quite understand each other very well. And on the back of that, when they're going through the black box, they noticed that what happened was a communication lapse. And from that moment on, they made a rule that the two people flying the plane must speak the same language.
Mm. Okay.
Right. So you can look at it sounds like a very simple solution, right? But it's almost
Yeah.
like being able to go through your failures, right? And being able to embrace that failure, not because you are a failure or whatever, but when things
Yeah.
don't go right, you have to have the presence of mind to admit that something hasn't gone right and then to go back on it and say, okay, what didn't go right here? So you can kind of review it, fix it, and okay, is this something that can be corrected? Because again, looking at that, just put two people that speak the same language to fix a
Yeah.
problem. That's very, and that probably saved God knows how many like
Yeah.
plane crashes that's averted over time. But you wouldn't know that unless you kind of went through the box. So having that kind of thing where not to be afraid of failure, but having the right structures and the right processes in place, so that when things
Mm.
go wrong, first of all, you are um, self-conscious enough to be able to admit that okay, this has gone a bit wrong, but then
Yeah.
being able to kind of review it, unpick it, and then figure out what's wrong so you can do the right thing and kind of get better the next. And even if you're only getting better by 1%, 2%, you then have like the compounding sort of marginal gains kind of thing where your gains then compound over time. So if you keep making those kind of minor increments and minor sort of improvements over time, you
Yeah.
you you end up being good. So yeah, don't be afraid of failure, and yeah, impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion.
I love that. I love that. And I really love that the idea around almost doing like a debrief basically upon every mini after
Mm,
every mini hurdle or failure, whatever it may be, however you want to coin
mm,
it. I think we did that quite a lot last year in terms of operationally when we reflected back
mm,
on projects that we delivered or when we did things maybe when we did things maybe pro bono for companies, maybe like our workshops perhaps. We did like a debrief to review actually was it successful and how do we measure success.
mm,
And
mm,
I've now become one of those people who
mm,
hated
mm.
spreadsheets to somebody who now loves spreadsheets now because we're now every month or so we're always like reviewing okay was it
The
successful.
thing is,
So yeah, so
it's
now
not being the fact that you start doing things that you didn't love doing before, just for the sake of
yeah,
it does that to you. It does
yeah,
that to you.
yeah. So I now, if you ask me about spreadsheets now, I'm now obsessed. So if it's color coded, organized, categorized, filters, all of that, I'm like, yes, that is a good looking spreadsheet. So yeah, no,
I know, I
I love
know. The thing again, someone told you like how many years ago that you'd be kind of like some kind of spreadsheet geek. You'd be like, "What's that?" Like, not possible.
it.
But now it's like, yes, sign me
Exactly,
up. Like, kind of, we're about to have like a spreadsheet off. Like, oh, can your
exactly.
spreadsheet do this? Like, all that. Yeah, yes.
Exactly. And yeah, but I do think that's so important in terms of embracing those failures. And I think it can sound cliche, but I think more so now as we are entering like a entrepreneurial world, so to speak, where everyone is an entrepreneur to some degree. I think being able to be willing to embrace that
Mm,
failure so you can learn from it and have those incremental compounding improvements is so much it's almost more valuable than just sitting there
yeah,
thinking I'm going to be hesitant and pause and stay in my status so far without moving
Mhm,
forward. Yeah, I love that.
mhm.
I love that. No, that's I might keep that little snippet for myself as a little reminder in after this. So
A little backstory.
exactly, yeah, definitely gonna keep that one for myself, definitely. And I guess to round things off, going back to the whole idea of storytelling and stories, and that young Bemi who was, I guess, creating his own narratives when he was playing tabletop football. I guess what letter would you write to that young Bemi to encourage him as he was growing as a young person?
Mm. I think I would say again. I'm a big fan of sayings. I'm African, so I like
Yeah,
sayings. Um, uh, well, I'm Yoruba precisely, and
yeah,
and that's probably by I know all different tribes. Have anyway, let's not get into that. That's a separate. But a particular saying I like, and a particular that saying resonates with me. Again, going back to what I mentioned in the beginning about um, early on in life, where I got a lot of feedback about, oh, if only you worked hard.
mm,
Um, I've come to believe strongly in life that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
yeah. Okay.
Like I believe that. I believe that very strongly. My life is a case study of that. Um, when I started to work hard and I started to kind of apply myself to the ability that I knew that I had, there was a marked difference in my trajectory. It just
Mm,
changed. And I believe everyone has that kind of trajectory in them. So, and then going back to the thing, so a lot of people have a lot of like natural gifts and talent. So all this stuff I was talking about in the beginning about table soccer and natural gifting and whatever, without layering hard work on top of that,
mm,
who cares, right?
yeah.
Like
Mm,
who cares? Hard work is what really makes that tangible. So for me, that's the that's the thing I would have told myself, like from like start working out from when you're younger. So like you don't like who knows? I always wonder. It's one of those things that hindsight is always 2020. But at the same time, I'm very thankful for where I am. I'm thankful for what I have and the journey that I have.
mhm,
Because I believe this is where I'm meant to be right
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But also looking back, because one of the things I say, yeah, hard work. There's no substitute for hard work. You have to work hard. Like there's no
Yeah.
substitute for it. And also one thing I'm trying to drill by God's grace, drill into my children. You have to work hard. No matter how much talent you have, no matter how much opportunity you have or don't have,
Yeah.
if you're not able to roll your sleeves up and work hard, like you'll be selling yourself short.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's so true, and I think I might have to take that as well as a new dad as well. So I think when my son is of age, I was like,
hey,
hey, Mikhail, come on,
drill this into them. Like, let's
let's
go,
do
let's
this.
go.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. I love that. Well, Bemi, thank you so much for joining us today on the other
Thanks for having me.
side.
It's been a great chat. Great chat. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. We've got a lot of gems in here, so I'm looking forward to topping it up and seeing what we can do, and then posting it out, and hopefully it adds value to somebody's